I
Uh,
unmuted myself. Yes. Did it. Hi, everybody. How are you all? Welcome to Digital Hammurabi. It is time for another Ask Me Anything, because we're trying to do those on a monthly basis to try and kind of deal with some of the backlog of questions that get emailed to us. Because frankly, I'm really bad at responding to emails. It's just,
you are pregnant with twins and 3 kids in the house, so
I feel like at some point that ceases to be a good reason
I don't know that it does.
to respond to my emails. Anyway, good evening. Sorry, originally this was going to be tomorrow, but then I thought it was going to be today. So we got all set up and sat down, and Josh brought me a cup of tea and everything. And then I looked at the calendar and realized, oh, damn, this is scheduled for tomorrow. So we're here today instead as a delightful surprise for everybody. And it's lovely to see you all. Thank you for joining us. We have some old friends in the side chat. If you're a new friend, hello and welcome. It's nice to have you here too. We have some questions that we have had emailed to us. If you have questions for us, please put them in the side chat and tag us. If you don't tag us, I cannot guarantee that we will see your questions. I also can't guarantee we'll answer your questions, because last time we did this, we had an awful lot of questions that we just didn't get to. And it's Vegan Atheist Coral's birthday. Happy birthday. I hope you have some delicious vegan-based cake, because cake is, in my opinion, the most important thing about birthdays. We enjoy those. Okay, so, oh, and this is Josh, by the way.
Nobody cares.
Yeah.
Nobody cares.
They
They're
care.
like, we just want to hear you talk.
No, you're the one who answers most of the questions. Oh, vegan cupcakes. Coral had vegan cupcakes for her birthday. Good choice. Good choice. It was our youngest daughter's 8th birthday recently. I'm wincing because she came to live with us when she was 2.5.
Mm-hmm.
She was very small, and now she's 8, and that is
frightening.
I didn't think it's allowed, frankly. Yeah.
To be perfectly candid.
Indeed. And as my mother told me when I was her age, I'm going to put bricks on her head to stop her growing, because she's getting too grown up far too fast. And she asked for a strawberry cake, which I tried my best with. And bless her, she ate it and she said she enjoyed it. It was not my finest hour. It was edible, but it was not like the best cake. That is very kind of you to say. Not the best cake that I've ever made. Anyway, we already have some questions coming in. So we're going to start off with one that came through on Facebook from Renal Minglani. Thank you for your question. Asking, what is poor scholarship? And we're starting with this question because if you've been a long-time viewer of Digital Hammurabi, you'll be very familiar with our catchphrase, which is, Dr. Josh.
Resist poor scholarship. Always ask, how do you know that?
And poor scholarship, it's a great phrase because it really encompasses so many sins and so many things that you just should not do as an academic or even as someone who's interested in serious research. I guess for me, sorry, I'm overheating already. For me, one of the things that most eloquently encompasses poor scholarship is coming to a problem or a question with a conclusion already formed, and not considering actually what the evidence tells you or where the evidence leads you. And this happens all over YouTube, academia, high schools, everywhere. If you look at something with a preconceived notion of what it means without actually considering what the evidence tells you, for me, that's poor scholarship. Josh.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we see that so often in what we do here. So this is apologetics, right? I mean, I mostly see it in Christian apologetics, but that's just because that's what I engage with. But I mean, this is Lester Graba has a wonderful quote. He's got an article on this 1987 edited volume that the name of which escapes me, but it's up on my shelf. But he says, like paraphrasing, like he's talking about fundamentalism. But I think the same applies for apologetics. Fundamentalism cannot be wrong, right? The whole point of apologetics is to defend the position that you hold. And while that's admirable, I think from a certain perspective, uh, from an academic perspective, we should be challenging our ideas. Like I wrote my dissertation on this particular type of writing, Sumerian writing, that comes from the early second millennium BCE in the city of Kish, and there are several different ideas of what this writing is, like what it's being used for. And I had my idea, but the reality is I could be wrong. I mean, there's no question about that. In fact, I suspect I probably am. Maybe not in every respect, but I'm sure that people will, take up the mantle where I left off and say, actually, 30 years from now or whatever, actually, Josh Bowen had this idea, but it's actually, this, and
We've got
that's
more
the way it
evidence,
should be.
and we're reformulating how we view the world based on that evidence.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing that I should be doing is digging in my heels and saying, let me defend my position. I think, instead we need to be saying, all right, here's why I argue for this, but what is all the evidence? So,
and I think that kind of, you see that in the second half of our little catchphrase thing. Always ask, how do you know that? Like if you're not looking at the evidence that someone's presenting, if they're not looking at evidence and they're just telling you a conclusion without explaining how they got there, I think that's very problematic, and that should kind of lead you to maybe question exactly where their conclusions have come from. Sorry, I'm actually making a note of what time we start different questions, because that way we can go back and tag everything so that when people come and see after the fact, they don't have to scroll through a bunch of us talking randomly. I mean, honestly, this whole thing is just us randomly talking, so you all are glutton for punishment, if I'm honest. Critical Cripple, how is the bathroom coming? I am heavily pregnant and therefore deciding to rearrange the entire house. I have not completely renovated the bathroom. We put a new mirror up.
And we took the shelves down.
Took the shelves down.
And now there are huge holes in the wall.
Now there are huge holes in the wall that need spackling and painting over, which is fine because I want to repaint the bathroom anyway. So it's not going well, but we do still have a bathroom.
I love Jeff.
Jeff. No.
Yeah, Enkidu. I'd say Enkidu was the Bigfoot character.
I mean, I really can't argue with that, can I? Math Pig wants to know what the meaning of life is from a Sumerian point of view. Having one's name remembered.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good answer.
Sorry, that's a very serious answer to a very silly question. So, Alan Cannon. Hello, Alan. It's nice to meet you. I don't think we've met you before. What cuneiform tablets remain to be unearthed? Ooh. Will we ever find another library of Ashurbanipal? That's a really good question.
That'd be awesome.
I hope so. That would be great, because there are so many texts that we have like the beginning or the endings of, and it would be really nice to find complete versions. I don't know how likely that is.
Yeah, there was an article put out by Miguel Seville and Erica Reiner. I think it was in the late 60s, maybe. This is a series of articles put out on Sultan Tepe texts, I think. Anyway, essentially what their conclusion was is the more tablets that they found, the more tablets that archaeologists dig up and Assyriologists look at, the more we realize we're getting, even in different areas, different periods, we're coming up with more copies of, sort of the same
kind of thing,
the same texts. So, I mean, while we all cross our fingers and hope, that new literary texts come up. I'm speaking of literary text here, in particular. Whether that will happen, I don't know that. If history is any guide, I don't know that we will. But
the good thing is that the more excavation that happens, especially looking at things like domestic architecture, which until relatively recently has not been something that archaeologists have concentrated on, relatively recently, like the past few decades, it's definitely changed. But the more domestic architecture people dig up, the more personal records we get.
Mhm.
Not masses, obviously, because if you're at the kind of poorer end of society, you probably are not going to be reading and writing. But if you're looking at like merchant class people, a lot of the times they'll have like records and legal contracts and things like that, which, while not the literary texts that we would get from another Ashurbanipal's library, I think probably give us or help us to get a fuller picture of society as a whole, rather than looking simply at the literary tradition of Mesopotamia. So, as to how much there is left, I don't know. Some. let's go with some. Okay, Trevor. Hello, Trevor. It's nice to see you. Ancient World is describing what years approximately? And that's a good question. I was actually asked that on Twitter recently, because we're planning a YouTube day of ancient history, or ancient history day, where I get as many ancient history YouTubers together as I possibly can, and we do like a whole 24-hour marathon of new historical content. And someone asked on Twitter, what do you mean by ancient history? And my answer was, I don't know. It depends, because if you're looking at what Josh and I study, it's like several thousand years BC. If you're getting into the classical period, that's a lot later. And then if you're considering things like South American archaeology, for us, that's really late. But I would still be very happy classing it as ancient history, because it's pre-industrial, it's pre-modern. What do you think, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about the ancient Near East, usually we're talking about the beginning of writing down through Alexander the Great. Usually, I think that's what most people do from a historical standpoint. But I mean, that's just sort of looking at Mesopotamia. So, like in the book that's getting ready to come out this summer, I think we ran it from 3000 to 331 or whatever. I did that more because Van der Meerop is the one that I got that from, and I think it worked out well for him, and I think it works out well for us. But
I think it's one of those things that you probably would get a different answer for depending on who you ask.
Yeah.
Like, it's entirely possible that South American archaeologists and academics would not consider what they do to be ancient history. I don't know an awful lot about the field, so I probably should be talking about it, if I'm very honest. It's really interesting, and I wish I did know more about it. But I only have one lifetime to research, unfortunately. That makes me really hope for reincarnation.
The problem is I don't know that you'll remember.
Well, I mean, you say that, but then there are all these fantastic interviews on like the Today Show with people who used to be Cleopatra. So if they can remember their past lives, I think I can probably come back, remember being an Assyriologist, and then decide to go a different route with my research.
Yeah.
And then I'll be like more smart.
Yeah, I mean, Lord Rael is Jesus
exactly. See,
and
he
Moses
knows already.
And King Arthur. So
love to be King Arthur. BigZebra.com. Hello, Mr. Zebra. Does the chimera that appears behind you also appear in tales anywhere from Babylon or nearby? So that is not a chimera, that is Marduk's dragon. And I don't know if it appears in any literary contexts. I can't think of any. And it's the same with Ishtar. The goddess Ishtar is very strongly associated with lions, but I can't think of lions appearing in her mythology specifically.
Yeah, I'd have to think about it.
And I can't think of Marduk like having a dragon or riding a dragon. I wonder if that's where the Tiamat dragon association comes from. Because someone asked me that question again a month or so ago, why people picture Tiamat, who is a sea goddess from a myth called the Enuma Elish, why people tend to picture her as a dragon. And I didn't have a good answer because it doesn't come from the Enuma Elish. It's not like she's not described as a dragon. but Marduk defeats her, so I don't know if that's a Marduk Tiamat dragon thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think now you're getting into this sort of
Oh, I'm
chaos
completely
comp.
speculating.
Oh, no, not you. I
Speculating.
meant like with the question. I think your answer is good. I think it's
Thank you.
chaos comp that you're starting to get into, and so it's sort of a wide and complex motif.
Thingamabob.
Yeah.
Abby says, R.I.P. Norman Golb. What's your opinion on the Qumran sectarian theory? I don't have one. Josh, what's your opinion?
Yeah, I would refer you. There's actually a really good discussion of this in John Collins' book, The Scepter and the Star. And he's looking at messianic ideas, particularly in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And so, like, I'm certainly far later than my area of expertise. It's very late Second Temple. But he has a really great discussion of it. And so, like, I would think that Qumran, that was a sectarian group there, and that's who was responsible for creating the scrolls. But he has a really good discussion of that and sort of the pros and cons. That's where I would refer you.
Excellent. I'm glad you know these things.
But I'm like, it's not my area of expertise. He's got a good bibliography there. So,
hooray! And we have Atheist Carl again. Hello, Carl. What is your goal for HAPS over the next few years? That is an excellent question. I'm always happy to talk about HAPS. So for those who are maybe new to the channel or have not been with us,
what's the HAPS?
Terribly long. HAPS is the nonprofit that we founded 2 years ago now, nearly three years ago. And it's a crowdfunded grant program for PhD students. And we started off offering $2,000 to 3 students to cover their summer expenses for research and for living. And for that kind of thing, last year we managed to fund enough for 3 students. This year we're going to do 4 students, which is amazing because we had a very cool raffle. And actually Coral won one of the prizes. We had a really cool raffle and raised $2,000+, so that covers another student. We also have, as part of that, an undergraduate program that we're launching this year called Black Scholars Matter, which is aimed at getting Black undergraduate students into professional conferences so that if they think they're interested in a career in academia, specifically our small area of academia, we can help them get kickstarted with things like networking, because that can be really, really tough. Mm-hmm. So what I'd like to do is keep expanding, specifically the PhD program. I would very much like to be able to offer maybe 4 scholarships or 5 scholarships regularly, rather than relying on these fundraiser, like one-off fundraisers that we do. As far as Black Scholars Matter is concerned, I'd like, again, to be able to offer 4 scholarships. We would send 2 students to ASOR, which is the Assyriological Archaeological Conference that happens yearly in the United States, and then 2 to ARCI, which is the American School of Research in Egypt, American Research Center in Egypt, their conference in the United States. So I'd like to be able to send 2 to each. I think that would be really nice. And if some millionaire is watching and would like to donate money to us, I would also really like to try and set up a fund for indigenous scholars, by which I mean academics from Iraq, from Iran, from Egypt, from Turkey, who are studying their own cultural heritage, which I've been so privileged to do, and help them to really get the funds together that they need to do their own research. That would be really nice. That's a lot of things. Many things. So yeah, Jeff Bezos, email me. Okay, who is next? We've covered the Bigfoot thing. Well, they're Bigfoots in America.
Who is next? Name your sex tape. Sorry, I've been watching too much Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Okay. Sorry. What is the earliest known written example of a creation myth, and from what site? I'm not sure I could tell you the site.
Yeah, so I haven't thought about. So certainly from the Old Babylonian period, we have creation myth is sort of a.
It's a tricky one.
Yeah, it's sort of a. What do you mean by creation myth? So certainly we have things like Enki and the World Order. These are, I don't think there's an Orthry manuscript of that. Most of this stuff is going to come from the Old Babylonian period. That doesn't mean that that's definitely where they originated. But we're going to see those at House F in at the city of Nippur. But the person to look at is Lambert. Lambert has a book in the Mesopotamian Civilization series called Babylonian Creation Myths, I think is the title. And I think it's been made affordable. It's published by Eisenbronze. But he's going to go through all the creation myths, anything that would be classified that way. And so
he'll have more detailed specifics.
Yeah.
Sorry, we can't give you a more specific answer, Ray. The problem is that there's a lot of texts and there are a lot of sites, and remembering which specific text came from which specific sites can be a little tricky. But I mean, Josh is absolutely right. A lot of the literary texts we do know from the city of Nippur, which is Babylonian. So we have a super chat. Thank you, Ben. Always appreciated. So we have Ben's question. Any recommendations on Melchizedek in Genesis 14 or Psalm 110 that aren't through a Christian lens?
Genesis is notorious at this point for not having like a really good commentary. I remember Joel Baden was asked this on Twitter, like, what's a good commentary on Genesis? He wrote, David Carr has one coming out, but I don't know that it's more than Genesis 1 through 11. Sorry, I see Ben saying Baden doesn't know don't know what to do with it exactly. If Joel doesn't know what to do with it, there's not a lot of hope for me. Yeah, that's a good question.
Sorry.
I'd have to think about that a little bit. I mean, obviously, who is it? Is it Nahum Sarna who does is that Oliver? I'll go get him. You go ahead.
He's gone because I muted myself and then started talking. Oh, gracious me. 2-year-old, 3-year-old is getting up regularly, which is super fun. Super fun. Yes. Anyway, sorry. I'm going to scroll down and find a new question and see if it's one that I can mention or I can answer. Darren Lawrence. Hello, Darren. Nice to meet you. So about the behemoth in the book of Job, do we see any other parallel in other neighboring civilizations? I picked the wrong question to answer. Oh dear. The thing is, if it's biblical, we really need to get Josh back. I will do my best, and then I will ask Josh when he comes back again. So just thinking generally about large creatures, you have in Mesopotamia specifically, you've got the bull of heaven, which is, as you might have guessed, a very large bull that is a very destructive force, and the goddess Ishtar kind of borrows it from her dad to kill Gilgamesh because he won't marry her, which is a super sensible response to someone turning down your marriage proposal, is let loose a mythical creature on them. And it's described as being so big that it kind of snorts and stomps its legs, and huge caverns open up, crevices open up across the land, and Gilgamesh and his companion Enkidu have to kill it. So we have that. I guess if we really get into it, Tiamat could maybe be related. She's tricky because she's not physically described in a lot of detail. At the end of the Enuma Elish, which is again this Babylonian creation myth, at the end of the myth, after Marduk kills her, he kind of uses her body to make heaven and earth. So, and she's described as having eyes and breasts and like humanistic features. So I'm not sure that she'd fit into that kind of behemoth type description. And I don't know enough about things like Ugaritic and Canaanite mythology to speak about them, or unfortunately Egyptian. Sorry, I'm not terribly helpful. We'll get Josh back in and then we'll ask him if he knows any questions. Let us see. Sorry, everyone. What is the oldest written text, not Sumer? I mean, Egyptian. If we're not going with Sumerian, then there are some Egyptian texts that are that will be older than Akkadian texts. Do you mean specifically mythological texts or just writing in general? Because if we're going with writing in general, we have, well, like Sumerian sales receipts and taxation receipts and similar things in Egypt. I'm not entirely sure what you're getting at. So if you can post a clarification, I'll try and get back to that. Hello, Josh. You're muted, my love. We had, sorry about that. We had a question that I gave my best answer to, and it wasn't a good answer. So, looking at Behemoth in the Book of Job, is there any other parallel in other civilizations? I said that if we're going with like general behemoths, we've got the Bull of Heaven and Tiamat, but those were really the only two that I could go with.
Yeah, I mean, again, Behemoth is sort of part of this chaos Kampf. So Leviathan, Behemoth, Rahav, these are all sort of, again, not my area of expertise, but yeah, so these are like you'll find parallels in this sort of chaos Kampf motif. So chaos Kampf is like creation via battle. So you see this in Ugaritic parallels, you see it in the Enuma Elish. But there's just sort of this, these sort of mythological creatures at creation, often sea creatures, and the deity conquers them in order to bring about creation, often through the body of that particular of one of those.
So Tiamat fits better than I thought.
Yeah. So of course Tiamat in the biblical text would sort of be paralleled in a demythologized way in Genesis 1 with the Tehom, the deep. But yeah, I mean, just that sort of general idea. Yeah, that was a good answer.
Perfect. Thank you. Sorry.
He wanted his nightlight turned to red instead of blue. It's very important.
3-year-olds, man.
So.
Sam Chaos. Good name. Do you guys have a favorite layman's myth about ancient Mesopotamia or any of the areas around it? I mean, favorite is a very strong term.
If they mean by layman's myth, like one that was more for the common folk.
Oh, see, I was assuming like Sitchin type stuff.
The what?
Sitchin type stuff. Stories made up about the culture by people who don't understand it.
Oh, well.
Who knows?
Mine's not going to be cool then.
Well, no, what was yours?
I was going to say, what is it that Foster calls it? It's the Old Assyrian, the one literary text that we have from the Old Assyrian texts about Sargon. Calls it like Sargon, Lord of Lies.
Lord of Lies, yeah.
But I think that was an interesting trend anyway. But no, it's like Sargon does that thing where he throws a mud brick in the water, and then grabs a belt and chases a gazelle and catches it and then comes back and pulls the mud brick out of the water. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty cool. Anyway.
I would say well, see, again, favorite is the wrong word because they drive me nuts, but the most well-known would be the ancient aliens theories. It's fascinating the things people come up with to explain things we already have explanations for, and generally pretty good explanations with evidence and science.
The word myth is being used here like falsehood.
See, I'm not sure. We've given you two answers depending on what question you're answering. You're asking.
That's what saying chaos is all about.
We're not very bright. We're not very bright. Sorry, I'm just going down finding. Oh, actually, while I look for more questions, we did have several others from Facebook. So we're going to ask one of those now. How do I become an Assyriologist? Do you have any school recommendations? And can you be both an Old and a New Testament scholar at the same time, or do you have to choose?
Do you want me to answer both?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, we could definitely give you recommendations on being an Assyriologist. I guess it depends on what stage you're in, where you live. But I mean, obviously, I'm partial to Johns Hopkins just because it's got such a good program. But the University of Chicago, the Oriental Institute, has obviously a great program. Harvard, Yale.
Unfortunately, all very expensive schools.
Yes. And I mean, was there a second part to that question?
Can you be both an Old and New Testament scholar?
It's just a different question. Yeah. You can. I have a friend.
I'd say it's less usual though.
Yeah.
People tend to specialize.
That's true. I have a friend that probably many people here know, Jim Majors, who sort of specializes in the late Second Temple period. And so he has sort of a foot in both camps. But yeah, it is. I think it is difficult because it's such a different. It's two different languages, two different groups. And of course, I have no specialization in the New Testament. But yeah, I think it's difficult. I don't know anybody that's a specialist in both.
The thing is, with ancient cultures, you tend to specialize and then you specialize some more. So
yeah,
my speciality is Assyriology, and within that speciality, I focused on royal inscriptions from a very specific time period. And like once you graduate, once you finish your PhD, it's quite normal to then kind of move on to something else. Maybe you write your dissertation into a book and you like maybe widen the scope of your research or take a different research direction. But people like you, it's rare to get someone who specializes in the whole of Assyriology because it's such a big field.
I think that's why you and I are in a unique position that I think is good. It's funny to me that people will come after me about being a real scholar. Like, am I a real scholar? And I'm absolutely fine with that. Like, you go for it. I'm not a research scholar because, like, I don't have a research position. We don't get paid
for it. We don't.
Yeah, so I'm fine with that.
Josh has a job, and I put stuff on YouTube. I mean, I wouldn't consider that real scholarship.
Yeah, but the nice thing about our position and what we can do, even though we're not getting paid for it and we're sort of donating the time, is that we have extensive training, formal training in this, and that allows us to be sort of this broad, conduit to the specialists. So I can, if you ask me a question about the documentary hypothesis, I can talk about it for a while. But at the end of it, I'll say, but it's not my specialization. You need to go talk to Joe Baden, right? If you want to know about the supplementary hypothesis, I can talk about it for a while, but you need to go talk to Reinhard Kratz or Schmidt or, Romer or some of these other guys. So, yeah, I mean, anyway.
I will. So, just briefly going back to the how do I become an Assyriologist question. If you're starting right from the beginning, if you're in high school and you're looking at Assyriology as a career, first of all, there are no jobs. So, do it if you want to. If you're passionate about it, I applaud you. But there are no jobs. So, having said that outright, because I think it would be very irresponsible of us to not mention that. You will need an undergraduate degree, preferably one focusing on ancient history or some area therein. My degree was ancient history. Josh's, what did you do for your undergraduate?
Basket weaving.
Basket weaving, underwater basket weaving.
Yeah, underwater basket. I was a religion.
There we go, religion. If you can get experience with ancient languages, great, fantastic.
We have a book.
We do. We have a book about Sumerian, but that will save you some time in the long run. And also, you will need to know French and German, at least enough to read it. So taking that, one of those or both of those, if you can, early is an excellent idea. And I'm talking specifically about the North American path to Assyriology, because it does vary depending on where you are and where you're planning on going to school. Having said that, French and German is necessary pretty much anywhere, because a lot of the literature, secondary literature, is written in French and German. Undergraduate degree. Try, if you can, in the summers to get relevant experience. Go on archaeological excavations. Again, if you can, as an undergraduate, that can be tricky, but if you find a professor who's willing to take you along, go for it, because it's fantastic experience and it really gives you a good insight into how the stuff that we study got from the ground to where it is now. Following that, you can do a master's degree, specializing again Assyriology, archaeology, that kind of area, and then a PhD. Some PhD programs will take you without having a master's degree already. I think Hopkins had a few students who came straight from undergraduates into the PhD program. And then the PhD should give you the rest of the training you need. But it's very important to do things like network, make sure the professors that you pick have research interests that align with your own. That's really important, because if they end up supervising your work, you want something that they are interested in.
If you're into literature and you go in with an Assyriologist that's really into economic texts, you're going to be doing economic texts.
Probably not a good match. Yep. And if you do get as far as considering a PhD program and you're applying to places, do your best to talk to current students or past students, people who have been through that program, who know how it works, who can give you kind of the inside information, and essentially tell you if they would recommend it to new students. Because these are the people who either will be your colleagues or will be, recently graduated when you start, and they have the best information about specific programs that you will ever come across.
And two things very quickly, just because I think that is responsible to say that jobs are very hard to come by. Part of the reason that we're doing what we do is hopefully the more people become interested in ancient Near Eastern studies and Assyriology, the more students will go, the more demand there will be for good professors to teach teach those classes, and then more jobs will be created. So, I mean, it sort of hoping these things will sort of spur that on. The other thing is, if you do happen to want to go into teaching in like a seminary, there are positions open in seminaries.
And also a PhD specifically, but humanities undergraduate and master's degrees generally will teach you very highly transferable skills, especially things like critical thinking, which is really, really useful in many walks of life, not least of which is reading the newspaper. But critical thinking, how to write properly, how to express yourself properly, working as a team, all this kind of fuzzy skills that people say aren't terribly important because everyone should be scientists and engineers. A PhD and a master's degree and an undergraduate degree in the humanities will teach you all of those things. And actually, a lot of employers do value them, even if you don't go into an academic setting.
Yeah. I mean, at a minimum, you'll learn to write very well.
Yes, which again, a lot of people like that. It's a very
Mhm.
employable skill. Anyway, sorry, that was quite a long excursus. We shall move on. Alan Cannon, what are the best Unicode fonts for doing cuneiform on your computer? Oh, I have honestly, and I'm an awful person for saying this, I have never got any of them to work properly. I gave up, admittedly, quite early on. But Josh, I think you had more success than I did with this one, didn't you?
Well, it posted it in 3 different places, which is funny, but, I just put in the side chat ORAC, so the openly rich.
Open, richly annotated cuneiform corpus.
There you go. Thank you. Um, so yeah, they have instructions there. They have codes, different fonts that you can download, and, Steve Tenney worked really hard to get that stuff right. So it's what I use on my laptop. I'm not computer minded at all. Is that a word? Computer
Yes.
minded? I just made it up. Um, but I was able to sort of figure it out. So if anybody's good with a computer, they could probably figure it out much faster than I did. But that's what I use.
Hopefully that's not one of the 5 websites poor Alan has to wade through on a regular basis to make his Unicode work.
No, once you, I think it's TLIT is the anyway. Yeah, I don't know.
Shane, how many actual Assyriologists are there? That's a good question.
Several hundred.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say there are many more.
And that it kind of varies depending on what you mean by actual Assyriologist. Are we talking about just tenured professors or people who went through grad school and have a PhD in Assyriology? People who are still active in the field? There's a few of us. It's a small field, but I wouldn't say we're like the smallest field ever. And apparently they're all on Twitter. So it's a good place to be if you're an Assyriologist. We have another one from Facebook. How many ethnic groups and nations inhabited ancient Mesopotamia and the Near East, apart from the Israelites, Canaanites, Babylonians? I mean, a lot. Like, there are a lot of different people groups there.
So, I mean, like, I think the one time that I can think of that sort of everybody's there, that you can see them historically, would be the Amarna period, if that's what we're talking about. So, obviously the Egyptians, Mitanni, the Hittites, Assyria, Babylonia, a little bit further west in the Mediterranean. But yeah, I mean, there are a lot of people groups that kind of come in and out, but those are sort of the big ones that I can think of off the top of my head.
The Amorites, the Hittites.
Yeah, sure. People at Ugarit, but they're Canaanites, sort of the Phoenicians, but they're all sort of part of Canaan. But that's good, yeah.
Lots of people. And we have another super chat that I missed. I'm very sorry, Carrie. I was not paying enough attention, I think. I was possibly panicking about having to answer questions without Josh that I couldn't answer. I was like, oh my God, no, Bible stuff. I can't do this. Which popular misconceptions in your field do you wish were true because they would make a compelling image or would make your research easier? That's a good question. Might take a minute.
I mean, I don't know if I wish it were true. I mean, it would make things easier from a research perspective, but if like the Bible were a history book, it would make things a lot easier, because like if the Old Testament, for example, the Hebrew Bible, were actually accurate with respect to when it talks about history, it very specifically, like, what it says would align with, historical reality, just because it's sort of detailed and lays things out in that way that, or if royal inscriptions were all accurate. I was going to say,
I don't think it counts. Well, maybe it does count as a popular misconception that you could take ancient texts at face value.
Yes, that's true.
It would be I think it would be less interesting though, but I
Hmm.
think it would be simpler and easier if you could read one of the royal inscriptions and say that is fact, that
Yeah.
is definitely not propaganda, and I don't
Naram
have
Sin
to.
definitely was a
He
deity.
was a god. He's not lying when he says he was made divine.
Sargon was a legitimate king because
He
his
also
name is.
floated down a river on a reed basket. Um, it would make things a lot easier if I could just read royal inscriptions and say, "Oh, it says this, therefore it must have happened like this." But again, I don't think it would be as interesting for me. Part of the fun is trying to work out exactly what a text is doing, because they're always doing something, and that something is not recording history. I think almost never is that thing recording history. Abby, what's on the shelf? What's on the shelf?
An elf.
Sorry. It's not an elf. We have a replica urn from the Dead Sea Scrolls, a selection of cuneiform tablets written by a friend of ours. What?
It's not an urn, but
yes, it is an urn.
Oh, okay, it's an urn. You're right.
I'm sorry. What is it?
I know. I mean, I guess that's what it looks like. It's just one of the clay jars that the Dead Sea Scrolls are found in, but it's really
That's not what an urn is.
I thought an urn. Okay, now I feel dumb. I thought an urn is what you buried somebody's. I mean,
you do that too.
ashes in.
You do that too.
Oh, well,
maybe maybe this is a British American conflict. No, watch. My mum's going to watch this and then call me tomorrow saying, "Megan, it's not an urn."
Megan, pip pip.
It does not say pip pip. Okay, so sorry. We have a selection of cuneiform tablets written by our good friend Dr. William Reed. We have a Shulgi prism written by Dr. Jeremiah Peterson. Also, a replica plague tablet written by Dr. Jeremiah Peterson. Is the grey cuneiform tablet yours? I think a cuneiform tablet written by Josh or by me, one of us, I'm not sure. A long scroll with Hebrew written on it, and a malachite cat from Egypt. It's a shelf of wonders. It's mainly cuneiform, if I'm honest.
Hey, Dave says that it is an urn, just not a funerary urn. So
excellent, not a funerary urn.
You know, it's unsurprising that I'm wrong. Unsurprising. Like nobody should go, oh, Josh was wrong.
I love you.
Happens all the time, folks.
Michael Roble. Hello, Michael. It is nice to see you, sir. How about the myth that everyone spoke the same language before the Tower of Babel incident? I mean, that would, are we talking about misconceptions?
Oh, yeah, maybe.
Maybe.
Because, I mean, we have a sort of, I mean, it's sort of debated. Yeah, it's probably too complicated to bring up. We have sort of this something similar to this in a mythological text in Sumerian, where you have this sort of incantation of Enki that talks about the unity of languages, and then but yeah, it's anyway.
If there was a more specific question, I'm not sure that we understood what you asked. If there's something more specific, then
I definitely agree that it's a myth.
Definitely.
Right. It's etiological. Trying to explain where all the languages came from.
Yep, definitely. Ulysses Leon, what's the general outline of Mesopotamian history?
We have a video on it. What is it? Mesopotamian history in under 2 minutes or something? Remember that?
I don't remember that.
Yeah, we did it real fast. Boom, boom, boom. But
isn't that clever of us?
But if you're looking for something more substantive, there is a book coming out soon. Megan, you want to tell them about it?
Yeah. I'd recommend Van der Meurup, but that's just sorry. Josh has a new book coming out that has a whole chapter on just a very brief outline of Mesopotamian history. It is called The Atheist Guide to
the Atheist Handbook to the
I'm just going to stop talking.
My God. First of all, you turn people away from it. You're like, no, don't buy that. Don't
I
buy that.
think the book has
I
a very
think
specific audience, and I don't think Mesopotamian history is that audience.
so. I think, just me, I think that the best place to start is that chapter of our book. Because it will sort of, you can
Pique your
wade
interest.
in, right? You can go in and have this broad understanding. Then you can grab Vandermeer up, you can grab Emily Kurt, and you can really sink your teeth into it. But the best thing, absolute best, if you're asking my opinion, totally unbiased, is to
Very
get that
unbiased.
book.
You should do
And
that. If you want like a really detailed, solid book on Mesopotamian history, Mark Vandermeer, History of the Ancient Near East, is the standard.
is the
kind of
best
textbook.
second book to go to, no question.
He's not going to talk to me anymore now. Critical Cripple. Are there any other Assyriology power couples?
Actually, oh boy.
I do feel like most of our friends from grad school have married each other.
Yeah.
None of them are pure Assyriology, though. I think we're the only Assyriology pairing. No, we're not. We can't say that. I think we're the only solely Assyriological pairing. Are there?
Oh gosh, I thought there was one. I'm trying to remember who it was.
I'm awful with interpersonal relationships in the field.
Terrible.
I usually don't. I know there are people who are married to other academics, but I couldn't give you names. They need to start their own YouTube channels, clearly, because then I'd know who they were.
Then we'd know.
Excuse me. Yeah, sorry. That's very, very unhelpful of me. Ulysses again. What's the earliest social system in Mesopotamia?
Social system.
I don't think I know what a social system is. You mean like form of society? Are we talking about like small city states, or I don't know. If you can post clarification, we will try and get to you. Yes. Sorry. Abby, what were the peasants doing in Mesopotamia while the elites were busy being kings and writing stuff down? They were busy fighting the wars and building shit for the kings. And farming. Lots of farming.
Being poor.
Being poor. So you get this is a good place to talk about corvée labor, but I'm not sure I can remember it well enough. So you do get people working essentially for the crown, building large scale royal building projects, walls, palaces, that kind of thing. Am I right in thinking that happened in years when there were no wars to fight?
Yeah, I think it happened.
Just generally.
Ilku service is what's coming to mind.
Mm-hmm.
It's been so long since I've thought about that. But no, you had people that you had a certain this corvée labor that was owed, but then you didn't do that all year long. So there were certain, support that was given to you, grain and things during that period when you did your service. But then you would farm or be a pastoralist or something. The remainder of the time, I'm oversimplifying that. It's certainly not my area of specialization.
Am I right in thinking that things like wars and building projects happened while crops, before crops needed to be harvested? So you go off, you fight the King's War, and then you come back and harvest your fields.
That sounds right, but I don't remember.
Yes. This is something that I covered at some point in my education and don't have any specifics for you, unfortunately. But no, they did their thing. They did stuff for the kings. You get people going on trading expeditions. And again, it depends kind of time period and geographical area and all that jazz. But yeah, living life, doing what they were told. So
I saw this and I thought, I do know one. So remember, Sammy Jenkins says, I'm looking for a book that explains all this stuff, but for atheists. So we have a book that's in the final stages of editing right now.
It's a
Hopefully be out
shot
by
at
the
me.
summer.
That's a shot at me, everybody.
That's not a shot.
I know, I'm teasing you.
But it's called The Atheist Handbook to the Old Testament.
Mhm.
And I'll do a quick rundown through the chapters if you guys want. Chapter 1 is an explanation of the narrative of the Old Testament. So not like historical reliability or anything like that, but what is the story that the Old Testament's telling? So this is a 2-volume series. This is volume 1 we're talking about, which goes from the creation in Genesis 1 down to Moses dying just outside of the promised land when Joshua was getting ready to take the children of Israel into the conquest. Chapter 2 gives an overview of Mesopotamian history from 3000 to 331 BCE. So in volume 2, we'll pick up like Egyptian history to sort of balance it out. But then chapter 3 is archaeology. So how archaeology works in general, and then more specifically, biblical archaeology, how it's developed. And then it gives some case studies doing the Canaanites and the Philistines. And again, all of this is geared toward how to have, as an atheist, a good discussion or a good debate or argument. Productive is what I mean by that. Then volume chapter 4. Let's see if I can remember them in order. Is did Moses write the Pentateuch? So it's an argument showing how Moses didn't write the Pentateuch. Then chapter 5 is the dating of the book of Daniel. Chapter 6 is I have a new chapter with some new stuff on slavery. And chapter 7 is the prophecy of Ezekiel 26. And then volume 2 is going to have stuff like women's rights, abortion,
Egyptian history.
It's going to talk about genocide, homosexuality, rape. Those are, the Exodus, the conquest, historicity of those things. But again, it's all geared toward atheists to be able to sort of engage in these discussions more productively. Okay, sorry. Shilling my own stuff.
I mean, this is the place to do it. Ben, is there somewhere I can read Dr. Josh's research on the use of the divine name El Shaddai?
Yes. So it's dated. I wrote it in 2002, I think. It was my master's thesis. Now, I went to a fundamentalist school, so the first introduction says that one of the assumptions of this thesis is that Moses alone wrote the Pentateuch. So, except for like the verses about his death, even though I think I may have said, certainly may have thought that he even could have written about his own death. Because, God can just give that to you. But I kind of go through the 48 occurrences of El Shaddai. But while that might be fun to read, I would recommend taking a look at Ted Lewis's new book. I always forget the name.
It's like this big.
Yeah, it's 1,098 pages or something, but it's why can't I ever remember the title of his book? Anyway, it's brand new. If you type in Ted Lewis Israelite history, it'll come up. Somebody will probably find it and post it in the side chat. But okay.
Critical Cripple has found our video for us. Thank you very much. So you can click on that in the side chat if you are watching now or watching later. Magnus.
Sorry, Ben. So if you email me, I'll try to dig out a copy of it if you really want to read my work.
Magnus asks, what do we know about Mesopotamian naming culture? Were there separate names or name conventions for different genders? I'd say we know quite a lot.
Yeah.
I will also say names are like a whole thing. Like prosopography is a study in and of itself. And the one thing I do remember from my Akkadian classes are that names change over time. So naming conventions change over time, which is really helpful for dating texts. Because if you have a text and it has a particular name form, you can go and look it up and work out roughly what time period that name was popular in.
I'm trying to remember, is it Natan Wasserman who wrote sort of extensively on prosopography.
I think so. Oh, quickly, the Ted Lewis's book is The Origin and Character of God.
Yes.
The religion
Brilliant
of
book.
ancient Israel through the lens of divinity.
But he's got a whole section on all the Ale names, and El Shaddai is one of them.
Sorry, carry on. Names.
Yeah, I mean it's very complicated.
We know a lot. The field knows a lot. Josh and I
Yes.
know little.
Right.
I will try and find someone to do an interview on naming practices, though, because that would be really fascinating. So leave it with me, and I will try. Scrolling down. Sorry.
Probably gonna have to start wrapping it up soon.
Yeah.
So we're past the hour mark.
No. Sorry, I'm just looking for. I'm not sure there are any. Lots of people talking, which is fantastic. I can't see any specific questions aimed at us, though. Oh, Critical Cripple already found Ted Lewis's book. Thank you. You're awesome. Hooray. From Ben, any recommendations on the Deuteronomistic history outside of Thomas Romer?
Actually, William Reed, Dr. Reed, taught a class on this in the past couple of years, and he sent me. I mean, it was specific to Deuteronomistic history, so he sent me a pretty extensive bibliography. And I just have to go dig it out.
There we go. There is.
So yeah, there's a lot
to find it.
Yeah, there's a lot out there. But I mean, I would imagine, given that Romer's book is pretty recent, that he's got a pretty extensive bibliography. So,
Waterblanc says this question has probably been asked a million times, but what is Dr. Josh's doctoral dissertation on?
So, in the Old Babylonian period, which was roughly 2000 to 1600 BCE, there was a city called Kish, and at Kish were found a whole bunch of very fragmentary tablets, and on these tablets we had scribal exercises and we had religious liturgies. And so I wrote my dissertation on those tablets, the scribal education and the liturgies. And the liturgies were written they're all written in Sumerian. Most all of them are written in Sumerian. But the liturgies were written they were written syllabically or phonetically. So they were written how they're pronounced, not how they're spelled. So they call that unorthographic writing. And so I, wrote about them, wrote what was on them, and then tried to, suggest, how they were used. So the dissertation is available. Is it on our website? It's on my academia page.
I don't think it's on the website, but it is on academia.
And
if you don't want to sign up to academia, email us and we'll send you a copy.
Yeah. But I took that dissertation and sort of broke it down, and then Megan edited it to make it even better. And we published it as a book called, do you have it over there?
Da-da-da.
Look at that. Learning to Pray in a Dead Language, Education and Invocation in Ancient Sumerian. So if you want to know about how students learn to write Sumerian, and you also want to learn how priests prayed and how those two things connect.
Because believe it or not, they do.
It's pretty cool. I think it's a pretty cool book.
Is the book for you. So we are going to wrap things up now. I've got 2 more questions I'm going to go to from the Facebook Messenger. Trevor, Hip Hop Autonomous, I see your questions. If you could hold on to them and bring them for our next conversation, we will do our best. Are there any references to men and women being best friends in the Old and New Testament?
Men and women being best friends.
I mean, I can't think of any notable intersex friendships, but I don't know the Bible like you do.
No.
And he is specifying platonic relationships here.
Yeah. I mean, certain. I mean, best friends. I mean, Paul. Like Paul, I wouldn't call them friends necessarily. Paul certainly had women that were sort of in his entourage's support, but that's outside of my area of specialization. But no, I can't think of. Yeah, I can't think of anything.
Thank you for trying.
Sorry.
No. And final question for the evening. Do we have any non-biblical accounts about life in ancient Israel, like local customs, practices, food, or just what life was like?
Yeah, so we have it's a new book out actually at Eyes and Bronze. It's about I mean it's late, but it's Judea in the Hellenistic period. But we have from Elephantine, of course, that's not in Israel proper. It's Israelites that are down in Egypt. But that gives us some, information about that. Uh,
I'd say if we're not talking about strictly written evidence, we've got a boatload of archaeology
sure. Yeah.
that speaks to this experience. And I actually found, I haven't read it, but William Dever wrote The Lives of Ordinary People in Ancient Israel, which I suspect will go into this kind of thing. And William Dever is a name that I know and trust. So
Yeah.
I'm comfortable recommending that without having read it.
Yeah. Yeah. Bill Dever's brilliant. I always recommend his 2020 publication, Has Archaeology Buried the Bible? It's a short little book, but it's brilliant in what it does. And of course, he's got a 2001 publication called Did God Have a Wife, I think, or Did Yahweh Have a Wife? I can't remember.
Wasn't
I'm
that
so bad
Francesca?
with titles. And she did write.
Oh, hers is a different title. Okay.
But yeah. Sorry, I forgot what the question was now.
Sorry, we're both falling asleep, you can tell. It was about, do we have accounts of everyday life in ancient Israel?
Yeah, there's not a lot. As far as written accounts are concerned. So, I mean, that doesn't mean that you can't, obviously, you can't use the biblical text, because I think that you can. You just have to use it critically.
Mm-hmm. And I might get Roseanne on to talk about this, because Roseanne Lieberman, Dr. Lieberman,
that's a good idea.
Was at grad school with us, and she does some of her research has been into like clothes in ancient Israel, and she uses the biblical text to answer questions about like the lived experience of people rather than kind of spiritual aspects. But she'd be a good person to talk to about that.
Mm-hmm.
And there we are going to end. Thank you all very much for joining us. It's been a delight. I hope we answered some of your questions. I'm sorry if I know we didn't get to all of them. I'm going to.
I think we did okay though.
We did pretty well. There's a couple that we missed. But I've got a nice Word document that I copy and paste all of your questions into if we don't get to them. So Trevor and Hip Hop, please come back. Thank you very much.
This is such an amazing So there's this thing on Twitter. I won't close this, but it's brilliant. I'm thinking through how to do this. So there are certain clues that if you've studied a foreign language, you can tell when somebody tries to speak that foreign language but doesn't know it, right? I think everybody gets that. And if you've studied an ancient language, you hear that a lot. So, for example, given that I've written and talked a lot about slavery in the Hebrew Bible, the word eved for slave, I hear people say abed or aved or avid or any other pronunciations, and it's one of those things that can, when you hear someone pronounce a word, if they've actually studied the language or not, almost instantly in so many, in several cases, in many cases. So because it's a word, or it's a type of word that you learn your first semester how to pronounce it and how to pronounce it correctly. So then you can tell pretty quickly, do they know the language? Have they studied the language or not? When you have people, and I'm sorry, I just see this a lot in Christian apologists. It's where I see it. People that will use, in particular, Hebrew, but also Greek, but it happens for me anyway, more with Hebrew, where they will make arguments, sometimes quite complex arguments from the Hebrew. And when I say complex, they're often complex and fringe, or very, like, they're very specific arguments from a particular scholar. And when they do that, I think, okay, I hear you pronouncing that word that way, so you don't know Hebrew, and now I hear you arguing somebody else's very nuanced and specific argument, oftentimes that's been quite heavily critiqued by other scholars in the field. Anyway, so somebody did something similar. There's another sort of tell. It doesn't always mean that they don't know the language. It could just be a mistake. But if oftentimes, because Hebrew is written right to left, I will see very, very often people will, in a video or something, they will put a Hebrew word up and it'll be written backwards, or a whole sentence and it'll be in there backwards. And it's because they don't know Hebrew and they don't know that it's not supposed to look that way, right? So that happened to somebody. And again, I don't know that they don't know Hebrew. It's just usually an indication that there's something going on. And somebody kind of called it out. And I was trying to explain this, why it is that people have that feeling. If you write Hebrew backwards, particularly if it's like the only thing on the screen, or one of the only things on the screen, it doesn't necessarily mean you don't know Hebrew. It's just sort of an indication that often that's the case. And so then people will start to think those things, like, wait a minute, whose argument are they using? Because they don't know Hebrew and they're making an argument from the Hebrew. Who are they getting that from? So I was just trying to explain that, but that was on Twitter, and I've probably over-explained this, haven't I? But that's where that comes from. So, it's written backwards. I'm going to be quiet now.
I love you.
Like 10 minutes ago, Megan was like, I tried to end the stream. Thank you so much, Bobby.
Thank you all very much for joining us. It's been enjoyable. Again, I'm not sure we actually answered any questions, but we tried really hard. Yeah. My brain is fried now. We should say goodbye.
Okay. All right, everybody.
You just go to bed, both of you.
Thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time, resist poor scholarship. Always ask,
how do you know that?
Digital Hammurabi is made possible by generous sponsorship from our patrons. Their support means that we have the technological and academic resources necessary to bring the ancient world directly to you. If you want to join the team, go to patreon.com/digitalhammurabi to see how you can help.